Okay, so very warm welcome to everyone. And today we're very happy to have with us a guest speaker, Wendy Farrington. And her topic will be From the Inside Out. And so I think a lot of you know Wendy already, but just a quick introduction that Wendy has been practicing Raj Yoga meditation with the Brahma Kumaris for it. I think it must be about 37 or 38 years. And when she first came to Rome, there was really not a lot about meditation or yoga or anything like that here. And so she did quite a bit of work as a pioneer in this field to make it what it is today, really very much more, shall we say, moving towards mainstream, and something that is really highly needed and requested. And so Wendy's background is as a sportswoman, professional sportswoman in the Olympics as well, she reached. And also as a professional dancer, and so that's just a little introduction, and we'll hear from Wendy about the topic Inside Out.
So hello everybody. The topic Inside Out can actually can wonder what it might mean, but I think we're all aware to a certain extent that there are within us, there are two worlds going on. There's the inner world and the outer world, and we don't always communicate this inner world with everybody. We keep it more close to home, in other words. We're more careful about who we express our inner world to. Now, if we take it from the beginning, let's say the baby, when the baby is first born, one would be wrong in thinking that the baby doesn't have an inner world. The baby has a capacity to understand and think certain things, but he does not have the capacity to express them. And so he's blocked, in a certain sense, in his inner world, which is hopefully for him pleasant, etc. But here's a level of awareness. We often, observing children, we think, I wonder how come they understood this. And they understand things beyond words, because words are not their thing yet. They haven't yet quite understood, the dynamics of language and what the words actually mean. But it's not that they don't understand, you see. And they live a long time in their inner world. And what their inner world contains is what will be actually the possibly to a certain extent the personality of your small baby. It'll either be very peaceful, or it might be an upsetting inner world, whereupon, and that depends on what it's lived before, and it might cry a bit, because it's unsatisfied with what it's experiencing. But we do all have this inner world, and as we grow and become, of course, obviously more conversant or more familiar with the outer world becomes absolutely much more fascinating at times than the inner world. And so we kind of lose contact with this inner world at times, unless we make specific efforts. And people who are interested in spiritual things will obviously stimulate their inner world, and they will continue to reside within that inner world. Because a lot depends on where your consciousness, your awareness is. You can be more aware of the outside or more aware of the inner part, And it's in the present time, one of the things that stimulated this particular theme is, of course, this whole situation of lockdown. And I was thinking about it during those first experiences in March, April, etc., when people were having their primary reactions to lockdown. Now, a lot of people have gotten very used to it. They may not like it, but they're very used to it. But certain people deeply enjoy it, actually, because those people who have developed a very deep inner world, and they don't have to be people that overtly declare themselves spiritual, but they're just more used to being on their own. And they can occupy themselves and get within their inner world and find a very satisfying experience from all of that. And the world has always had these sort of, why do hermits, for example, certain forms of monks live in silence? Your inner world is what there is behind the door that says silence. That's what's behind that door. And as we know, you might not be talking to someone, but it's not that your mind stops talking, right? Your mind will keep on talking within your inner world, but you're not expressing what you're saying. And the need to share what you're thinking might not be that strong. It all depends on what your habit is. We tend to be very attracted to the outer world because the outer world is an outer world that is always there, it's always changing, it's fascinating. And the outside world is what everybody brings to society. We don't live alone. And what they bring is partially created from maybe their inner world. But that's what they bring, and that's what they give to others. That's what they share. That's what they express. And it's very, it's very intriguing, And so we live in a society. We live with each other, of course. We don't live just entirely on our own. We live with each other. And then all of a sudden, something like this COVID situation will come up. Or, you can have this kind of experience if you have an illness, for example, and you end up in hospital for a while. You will find that there is a degree of isolation that is happening. You spend, let's say, many more hours than you would normally do on your own. And this is where you will come face to face with what you have actually created in your inner world. Now, if you've created something that is ongoing and that you don't feel that it's something unexpected or new. If you never go into your inner world, you won't know what to expect. It's like, in a certain sense, being on a train where you're going from one place that you know to another place that you know, and all of a sudden the train stops and you're chucked out onto a station that you don't recognize. You end up with yourself all on your own, and you don't recognize what's going on. It's like you've lost contact with yourself. Now, meditation will help you keep that contact, and not only keep it, but actually create an ongoing something that you're actually doing in this inner world. And some of which, some of the things that have actually been very useful to you, you will communicate out. But maybe you don't think of doing that. So it's very important, this whole aspect of keeping contact with your own inner world, because that's where your stability will come from. Your stability will come from that inner world in moments like in lockdown. A lot of people have suffered severely because they just can't they just can't handle the idea that they can't come physically close to people. It's unwise to do so. One of the greatest problems that has stimulated contagion in this particular case is because people somehow can't give up meeting with their friends or meeting at home with their family with whom they don't live, of course, obviously. And transmission can happen in that way. It's interesting how there is this need to actually meet other people. Now you think of people, and if you're alone and you're suffering from being alone, you're maybe suffering from a bit of solitude because this has been going on for months, and you're thinking of someone and you want immediately to go and see them, meet them, have a coffee with them or whatever. But, maybe if you think that people's souls communicate in the subtle, and if you think of someone, it's possibly that they've phoned your mind. They might have thought of you. Now, that is actually a meeting, if you can accept that as being a meeting, and not go into the feeling that you're missing out on the personal meeting, on the physical meeting. We tend to look at everything in a very physical way, because we live in a physical world, and this is normal. It's a very, very normal instinct. Naturally, you're going to think of the physical things. And this realization that when someone thinks of you or you think of someone, there is that contact between the souls. Now, I had an experience yesterday where I got an email from a friend with whom I used to work over 40 years ago. We were dancers together, to tell you the truth. And I met him last year briefly, and he wrote to me saying, "I hope you're okay. How are you doing?" etc., etc. And I wrote back within an hour or something, because I keep the email open. And now I didn't think for a minute, oh, it's a pity I can't meet Dan. He was saying, oh, I'm missing out on the idea that I thought that it might be nice to come to Rome in the spring. Well, we don't know what the spring is going to bring yet, so he can't, of course, make plans, he and his wife. And I took it as having been a subtle meeting. And this gave me incredible satisfaction. I mean, why would he have to think of me, who he hadn't seen? Last year he saw me, but he hadn't seen me for over 40 years. I mean, why did he have to even want to meet me? You know what I mean? After 40 years. And we sort of were looking, and I remember certain things of him. Physically, we were trying to recognize each other last year, and I recognized when he spoke. I recognized his voice more than his body, because, of course, naturally, in a number of years, your body changes. So does mine, And then I could see what it was that looked like him before and what does not look like him before. It's all a very physical thing. But the soul, him as a person, was unchanged in many ways. He's obviously matured. He's obviously, changed in certain senses. He's evolved, as one said. This is it. It's the outer world changes. Our outer world changes, and we know it very well, you know what I mean? But the inner world evolves. And it evolves in accordance with what you make of what your life is giving you. You can evolve very quickly, because it's not linked to a physical thing. I mean, I physically have changed in accordance with the years that I've lived between the time now, when I'm now, and the time when I last met Dan, which was years ago when we were working together, we were dancing. But inside, I have evolved, and so has he. But there is a good part of us that have been, let's say, for example, attitudes or original values or our principles. Something like respect or something like kindness. These are things that you will recognize in a person when you can't recognize the body anymore. Now, this should tell you that really that there are two things here. There's the body and there is the soul, which I am tempting to say a person. You know what I mean? The body is just the body. But we consider the body the person. This is where we get hung up in many ways. And another friend of mine, when we were talking about the inner world and when it started, well, what age did it start? Are babies or children, small children, spiritually immature? Actually, no. They're fully present souls, fully present people. And he was saying how he'd had an experience when he was about 7, which at the time profoundly touched him, but he didn't share it with anybody because he thought it was weird and something that other people would have not, easily teamed in with. But he went with his family, and he had several brothers, and they went to the zoo, and his parents bought them all at a certain point an ice cream. And all that's very normal. And he was saying, he was looking at the ice cream, and he suddenly realized, this is ridiculous. To get any pleasure, I've got to consume you, I've got to eat you, but if I eat you, you disappear, and my pleasure stops. And he was trying to work out at age 7 the difference between a passing pleasure of eating an ice cream and what it meant to be constantly happy and satisfied. And he realized there was a big difference between these 2 points. Well, there is. And this was all a bit much for a 7-year-old, you know what I mean? But children have these sort of experiences, and you can actually mention these sort of things to them, and they'll say, yeah. To them, it's very, very clear. Because a baby lives for so long, from the womb, when the baby comes into the womb, which is not immediate, but when the baby moves, and any one of you who's a mother will know that all of a sudden the baby starts kicking, right? Well, that's when the souls come in. So you can say, hello, welcome. Before, it's just a project of a human being, but then the soul enters and it starts moving, right? And that body then belongs to her or him. And the inner world then is present, definitely. And the inner world, of course, the baby remains for a number of months in the womb, and of course it can't communicate with anybody, so it lives totally within its inner world. And when we die, of course, you remain within your inner world, because that's all you've got. You don't have an outer world. You see, the soul doesn't die. What does it mean to die? When you die, it just means that your inner world is all that you have left. You don't have an outer world. It's not there. Now, if you have a very, very deep experience of your inner world, like a lot of people who meditate actually do, a lot of people who are monks, priests, I'm thinking of St. Francis now, these people who have developed their inner world extremely deeply, very intensely, they could easily die or leave the body and not realize they have. Because the soul will have continued its reflections and its thoughts and its experiences without any support of the body. And then there will come a realization when there is a need for thinking, something physical, and then all of a sudden the body's not there. So a lot of people will have this experience of, like, what we call death, you know what I mean? Because the inner world goes with you. You don't lose it. You can't lose it. There is no way you can lose your inner world. And so, because your inner world is what you create, and it's you. Your outer world is a changing circumstance that you live in and you create as you go along. And it changes all the time as you go along. So where do I prefer to be? This is a big question. How much time do I spend in one and the other? Well, if we've got a body, a physical body, it is absolutely obvious that we spend an enormous amount of time in our outer world. It's obvious. There's no way that we can spend less time in the outer world if we're working, for example, as you're doing now, or if you're walking, or you're creating food, or you're looking after people. It will be that. You will be living a lot of time in your outer world. And so it's good to balance it with an inner world. Very, very good. Now, there is an example that I like to think of people like Nelson Mandela, for example, who to me has always been an example of someone who no doubt had a very intense inner world, because how did he survive all those years in prison and come out of all of that perfectly sane? You know what I mean? That's not that easy. You're locked up in a small room. You're isolated, of course. This was the whole point of isolating him. He was isolated and he came out sane after all those years. Now, this is an incredible thing. But if your inner world is developed, which his obviously was, you can very easily retreat into your inner world and live a perfectly satisfying spiritual existence for your soul. And then the body is just surviving within the structure of the prison cell and the rhythms that the prison imposes upon you. Now, if you are trying to experience happiness within what the prison is offering you, you're not going to be very happy, I don't think. It's not going to be very much fun. But if you're living within your inner world, you probably can handle this quite well. And I've had a lot of these thoughts about Nelson Mandela. Of course, I never knew him. But it would have been fascinating to have asked him what he did mentally in his inner world while he was in prison. As a child, I went to a convent, you know, and of course they talked a lot about prayer. But to me, prayer was still within the outer world, because you're pronouncing words that you're reading possibly, or that you're remembering, you're memorizing. But do those words really express what your inner world is feeling? And so consequently, your prayer is an inner world towards another inner world, like, for example, it could be God. But that's not a surprising thing, right? That God is going to communicate in your inner world. He's not going to communicate probably in your outside world. But in the inner world is where you can find him, because he's there. He doesn't have a body, he never has had. So why would he have an outer world? He doesn't. This is why some people have, like St. Francis again, had great contact with God and never felt alone, no doubt, because his inner world was developed and he could communicate through his inner world to another one's inner world. But if you've not developed your inner world, you're left with only, what I would say, good wishes. Like you can read a prayer, you can think a prayer, you can recite a prayer, but it's not really the contact of the heart. The contact of the heart is almost like thinking of God, talking about the inner world now, and saying, opening up your heart and saying, here, can you read this? Well, don't worry, God can. He can read your slightest feelings, your inner worries, your inner insecurities, and he can create a feeling of stability and peace without you ever expressing it, actually. You may not ever express it. You may not even know. But if you have that understanding of the inner world and you just open your heart and say, take a look, can you read? Do you see what I feel? And where I need help, where I need strength, where I need your energy, where I need your love, where I need your power. And this will just happen. It's an incredible thing. Of course, if you can think of it and you know, then the help can be much more precise. I mean, obviously, it's very difficult to talk about an inner world and not mention the usefulness of having a really developed inner world when you're actually wanting to have a communication with God. It's not something to do with religion. It's not, it possibly won't happen if you go to church or something like that. That's not, it doesn't have to happen in certain places. It can happen at any time when you just happen to need this communication. Because you see, the wonderful thing about God is that he doesn't have any agendas, and he doesn't have any problems with time. He's always available. You know. And this feeling of contact between souls, which of course is very deep with God, because he's not got any material, physical problems that you've got to look after. If a friend phones you, there will be a point where they'll say, well, it's been lovely talking to you, but now the kids have come home from school, or my husband's come home from work, and I've got the food that's cooking, and we're going to have supper, so I'm going to have to call, ring off now. And they have their own lives to look after, of course, like we do. He doesn't. He doesn't have his own life to worry about. So he can worry about you. He can look after you whenever you need it. Wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning. And he's not going to say, what do you mean by calling me up at 1 o'clock in the morning? You stopped me sleeping. He's not going to say that. It's a very different thing. And this is why, like, thinking about the friends that I think about, they're there. It's not that they're not there. They're there. They are with me if I want them to be with me. And very possibly, I've had this experience, possibly you have had too, where you will think of phoning someone, and this will be a recurring thought, and you think, I really must find time to think, and they will write you an email, or they will phone you. And I've actually had people phone me when I've actually had my hand on the phone. It's been that precise. Well, it's because there is a communication. It's not just that because the phone happened to ring. There is a communication between souls who know each other. There is. And so when you have that form of communication just in thought, welcome it and say, wonderful, you're here with me. I'm not alone, because there is this thought. We feel we're alone when we can't see anybody around us. It's a very limited vision of things. But unluckily, the material world has its limits. It's very cut and dried. There's either this chair that's sitting beside me, or it's not there, you know what I mean? And if I can see it, it's there. To what an extent do I believe in only things that I can actually see, or that I have seen? There's a lot more going on in the inner world, or in the spiritual world, than there is in the physical world, actually. It's very wondrous. It's very colorful. Now, at school, they used to stimulate, of course, this was a Catholic convent, they used to stimulate our awareness of the inner world. And I remember once we were given, I was a teenager at the time, we were given a French, because I was at a French school, we were given a homework to do. And the homework was a comment on a famous French writer's, one of his sayings is Montesquieu. And what he was saying was, all the problems of humanity come from the fact that they can't stay alone in a room. Comment. Well, this whole thing came up very much when we started having lockdown. All of a sudden I remembered this, and we were not that old, all of us, and a lot of people chose another theme because we had a choice of what we wanted to actually comment on. But I chose that theme because I felt that it was very, very interesting. And of course, it was all on the fact that if you are locked up in a room, what do you do? What do you think? What color do your thoughts and your feelings have? Is the landscape within there interesting? Is it something that I have developed, or is it something like a no man's land that I've never seen before, that I don't understand, and that consequently is frightening? And it just came to me again as to the necessity now in the world of being able to develop our inner world. And that necessity to realize how incredibly positive it actually can be and what wonderful feelings it can give you. So, I mean, I've now been talking for quite a long time and would like to do a meditation with you about, you see, when you meditate, the thoughts that you are bringing in are the thoughts that come from your inner world. You're not thinking about what you're going to be making for breakfast tomorrow morning. You know, it is very clearly something that is rolling around in your mind and in your heart on a deep level, which will take form within your meditation and will take you somewhere to an experience of peace or joy or happiness or attainment. You may realize you've attained something because you've been making an effort to be, let's say, maybe more tolerant. What does it mean? You know, what has that brought you? It's brought you something. And so you can realize this. And it means that everything that you actually do in your life that is good is receiving its accolade, as you might say. It's a pat on the back. You can actually take that in and realize that that is now part of you. And it's not being just something that's happened in my outer world. And, oh, that was interesting, but what was all of that about? You know, I mean, you actually can catch on something that is positive for you and realize where it came from, which means that you can develop it further on. Actually catching things, like realizations, for example, our outer world will bring realizations at times, especially on the level of human relationships. You know, you're relating with people and what they do or what they say is unexpected. And it can be unexpectedly good, and it can be unexpectedly challenging. Now, do we just wipe that out, or do we bring this into the inner world and say, what's going on there? What's happened between the two people, or more, you know? And this permits you then to get into the actual using, because the inner world is not just an escape valve. It's not where you just escape. It can be for many people, I mean, you know, but it's not an escape valve. It's something where you can actually create what is going to be your state of mind in your life, and how you can plan a state of mind in certain circumstances when I have to do this conversation with a person, or I have this difficult conversation that I've got to have with this person. This is the state of mind that I want to maintain. And the state of mind that I want to maintain because I can see the good in the other. Now, that's very, how to say, it's a tri-dimensional thing. It's not just what's happening, what you're saying, and what you feel. It's not just a simple thing. It's all three, you know. And you can keep all three functioning if you understand in your inner life where you're at. I don't know if what I'm saying to you is making any sense. But sometimes these sort of things are actually quite difficult to express. You know, again, our words are more tuned to the physical things. You know, like this is my hand. Yeah, you can. That's easy. These sort of more subtle things are more complicated to express. So I just thought of doing a meditation, and then we can continue, and you can maybe ask a few questions if you have a few questions. Okay. I concentrate within. I pass through the door that says silence. And I let it gently click to behind me. I am within my inner world. I am totally open to my own creativity. What does my inner world look like? I can give it color. I can give it places and situations. That stimulate me to link the outer and the inner. And today, I see my inner world as a garden. And it's not just a small patch. It's unlimited. It all depends on my whim, my creativity. And my first instinct is to breathe deeply. Because within I can feel a cool breeze on my face. The garden is immense with tall trees and grass, big lawns. And I can feel the grass under my feet. In my life, when storms come, all the grass in my inner world sways. It ripples. As emotions flow over me. As rain falls on my heart. But my grass grows greener. Each blade of grass stronger. In this inner garden, I am not limited by the physical. As a child, I did want to fly and imagine the birds and the way they saw our world. My soul has no weight, and I go where I think. If I think of sitting on a branch and watching a bird's nest, I can do that with the speed of one thought. And my thoughts don't disturb the birds I'm watching. They continue to sing. And this brings a very subtle joy to my heart, as up in the tree, all things are as they should be. In my garden there are also flowers that I grow. These flowers represent my qualities. My virtues. And there is the red of courage. And the blue of serenity. And the yellow of joy. And the orange of cheerfulness. And I water them carefully, so as they grow beautiful, colorful. They make excellent gifts to my friends. Because what gift can an inner world give to another inner world? We all have gardens within. And sometimes these gardens are much greater than it may seem from the outside. Difficult to see. But there will come a time when the gardens are flowering. Spring. The spring of humanity. When our gardens will stay open and we can visit and admire each other's flowers. And walk silently and joyfully on the green lawns together. Om Shanti. So I don't know if you've got any questions. I mean, your meditation can be sitting by a lake or sitting by the seaside or whatever. It can be different every time. You don't want it to be boring. You don't want your meditations to be absolutely boring. That's the most important thing.
Wendy, there's a question in the chat from...
Oh, hold on. Yeah. No, I better go and look at the chat. Yeah. So very true, the observations with babies, yeah. And also this comment on their personality while they live a long time might be quite peaceful or upsetting depending on their previous lives. I'm fortunate to observe one, so now and then. He happens to be a very peaceful and joyful baby. Yeah, it's wonderful to know when, there's so many things that one doesn't know. I've never had any children myself, but I've experimented, if I may say so, with my sister's children, and it's worked. I mean, absolutely. The two souls can converse, and the conversation can go through just a hum, and I mean that, or the tone of your voice, which for a baby means much more than the words you're actually saying. And you can communicate right with the soul, and you can put them to sleep, you can put them in peace. It's surprising. I've had a lot of fun doing this. Of course, I haven't had all the rest that goes with having a child, which can be quite sort of annoying, no doubt. I was lucky. But it's nice to know that this can actually happen. And you can actually have a wonderful experience of motherhood if you know how to access this particular part of your child. Because the child can understand. The child has clear understanding of all kinds of things on that level. So, now question, is there a way to bring the inner world more to the surface in cases where the inner world has been suppressed or blocked for a long time due to external events and circumstances? Yes, of course, there is, definitely. You need to spend more time there. The more time you spend, in other words, in your thought patterns, I mean, not particularly actually only meditation, but in your thought patterns, your inner world is timeless. It's not linked to the clock on the wall. It really isn't. Your inner world, you can go back into your childhood, for example, and I have asked myself questions. How come I developed in this way? In other words, the principles that are important in my life. Because you've got to understand that as a human soul within a body, in other words, a human being, you are much more what your inner world is than actually what your physical world is. And you disobey your inner world or your spiritual world at your own fault and peril, actually. And when I say that, I mean, the moment you accept, for whatever reason, on the outside, to do something that is deeply against what your inner world is telling you, you're actually destroying yourself. I mean, we would not accept the idea of going into the kitchen, taking a sharp knife and sawing your hand off, right? That is not something you would accept. And yet we can do this for reasons that we feel are necessary. And it is deeply hurtful to our inner world and to what we think of ourselves. Because you are that. It's not that you are what your hair says and what you've done at the hairdressers or what your body does. You see, your inner world is what you really are as a soul. And so it needs, first of all, to be known, and then you have to respect what you know. And you can say to yourself, how come I got these values? Where did they come from? Are they accurate in accordance with what I know now as an adult? And you can go through a lot of the stuff that you learned as an adolescent or as a child and see what was accurate and what possibly is not really not accurate, not useful, not positive even for you. a lot of those things come with the feeling of hurt or something like that. And if you have a deep hurt, for example, as a child, you will just withdraw from that hurt and that inner world and go towards the outer world where you can get maybe an easier form of fun or happiness. And it's more tangible, of course, obviously, much more tangible. But the hurt remains, and your refusal to look at it is not beneficial for your future life. And if you think and say, is this right to think this? Was I right to understand this? And maybe as a child you did understand it that way, but maybe there was a mistake. Maybe you can now see things in a different light. And so this will help you a lot. You can very definitely change the experience that you have. Look at everything you've done. Like when I talked in my meditation about the growing of the flowers, the flowers that each one is growing is different. Maybe some people need to grow the flower of trust, for example. Maybe in our life we've experienced things that have deeply damaged the seed of trust within us for whatever reason. Because the inner world is very, very personal, and you can't bring someone else into it, actually. And the best work you can do is the work you do on yourself. And then you can look and say, well, that was a misconception, that was a wrong understanding, but you were young and that's what you understood. And the other person who we thought was right was actually basically a human being like everyone, and they were not exactly right in that particular moment. And as an adult, you can undo and build and create a flower that will then blossom in a different way. And it'll be more secure for you. So, very, very clearly, your inner world will come very much to the surface, as you say, very present. It'll become very, very present when you want it to be. It all depends on how much time you give it and how much time you spend in your inner world. You see, now that'll be different for each one of us depending on our lifestyle and what we're actually doing and the work and the family situation, all this kind of thing. Just make sure you have a little bit of time, quality time for yourself, so that you can develop your inner world.
Wendy, I see that there's a couple of hands up. So one is Wadzi and then Dominique. So Wadzi, would you like to share your question?
Hi, yes, thank you. Hi, Wendy, thank you very much. My question is on the concept of forgiveness, because in a sort of Catholic sense, and I take it the convent you went to was Catholic, I'm not sure. They say that we must forgive, right? They say that one must forgive and completely sort of let that person be. But how do you forgive someone who's toxic? Do you keep forgiving them? What is it that you do to protect your inner world if you're dealing, for example, with a narcissist or just someone who is damaged? How does the concept of forgiveness work in terms of safeguarding your soul?
I don't know that, as you say, whether any of us have enough quantity of forgiveness to give. In the word forgiveness, there is give. And it comes out in many languages too. We used to do workshops on this. And like pardon in French, a don is a gift. Vergeben, geben in German, geben is give. How much do I inside have to give? And in fact, the better solution, especially when it's a repetitive thing, is to realize that you can detach. If someone is chucking things at you, you don't have to sit in the same place. You can move. And it means that they're chucking whatever it is they're chucking at you because they're seeing you in a certain way. Now, you don't have to, they may be right, they may be wrong. The first thought is, is there anything that I have done to create this, to deserve this maybe, And that can be very beneficial because you can then say, I'm sorry, and do something different. But there are times when it's their problem. They're fighting, windmills. They're fighting their own problems. You're just something that represents their problems. So it's nothing to do with you, it's not personal. And so the best way then is to just detach, step back and say, okay, they're doing their number. It's like the rain or the wind, it's doing its number. And what do? Well, you don't leave your flowers out on the balcony, you pull them in towards the wall so that they don't get scooted off, into a corner. And you accept that. And you know when the sun's out, you step forward. And when the sun isn't out, you step back. And you just have to get this flexibility. And if you do, then it's okay. You will find that and the idea, the notion of forgiving, just how much gift have you got in there to give? How much do you have? It's more a question of seeing it as an inner power. If the idea of the giving in forgiving is a giving, how much tolerance, let's say, well, nobody likes the word, because it generally means that tolerance is something that will probably continue, but you can accept it if you are powerful, if the inner world is a strong world, if you are strong within what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself means, those flowers that you're growing, you know just how beautiful they are. You know how much work you've put into it. You know how valuable they are and how much your friends appreciate these flowers. Well, then you are, inwards you are strong. And so there is no need. You've got to get to a point where you don't need to forgive. It washes off you like water off a duck's back. And all of that is easier to say than to do, eh? It is.
Wendy, I don't know if we have time for another quick question. Dominique, you had your hand raised. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Wendy, for this beautiful image of the garden to allow us to get into our inner world. I think the being able to meditate and to access our inner world is really fundamental in order to find some balance. I wish I could do that more often. I try to do it every day, but it's not always easy. Mm-hmm. But it brings me strength and balance when I do it regularly, when I can do it regularly. You took the example of the monks, and I've always wondered how which level of spirituality they may have, attained in order to be able to stay in their inner worlds, throughout their lives almost. Mm-hmm. I think the external world is what helps you maybe to grow as well, because it is what challenges you. And what allows you to, to confront yourself with, the physical world, but really some important issues and connections with people and problematics in life. So. And I think that's what allows you to enrich your inner world. Mm. I don't know if you see what I mean, but I think that's what allows you to enrich your inner world, and then to come back to the external world to express what you have and what you have analyzed and what you have reached. So I think both are important. Although yes, the inner world is more important, I think, because it is what you are. It is what you are.
Now, I'll give you an idea, because I mean time's running out and you're going to be rushing off. When your inner world is equal to your outer world, is when you have paradise. It is. Just think about it. Now, when you're in your inner world and you're growing your beautiful flowers and you're doing all the best things you can, you're making it really, really, really beautiful, you're creating this. Your mind is constantly creating. Now, we know that what's on the outside has no resemblance at all to what we're doing on the inside. But what you're doing on the inside will give you the courage to face, to handle, to go beyond whatever it is that you've got to go beyond, to keep going, to sustain what you can sustain. But the whole aim and objective of this, you see, I think it was, I can't remember his name now, anyway, who said that our future will be a spiritual world. It won't be a physically lived world. Why? Because we can change things when we change inwards spiritually. And this is where I mean, you can't go out and just make everything golden aged or, perfect or paradise, whatever. You can't do that physically. It's got to come from the mind. And it will then grow. It's like your plant. It's not going to happen from today to tomorrow. But as you grow your seeds of your mind, the things outside will change. We have an immense power over what's going on outside. And a lot of other people, and sometimes us too, because we're not always that positive, we've created what's going on out there. But it's up to us to change it. And we can do that. And when your inner world is sufficiently strong, first of all, the outer world and the freak out on the outer world is not going to bother you that much. You're going to see it, you're going to handle it, but it's not going to be painful to you. And then slowly, you will influence. We all know, we influence plants too. People who have green fingers. I've never seen anybody with green fingers physically. But what does it mean to have green fingers? You're influencing that plant, and the plant is only too willing to be influenced if the influence is good. And this is how it happens on a much wider scale. This is how creation happens. And we say God's the creator, but God's hand in this is we who are here handling this outside world. He influences us and gives us the strength and the courage and the power and the trust that we can do this, and the world will change. He's not going to take a magical wand, and go wham, wham, here it is. This is a perfect world. Get on with it. Because we'd all say, what's that? We've got to create so that we can recognize what we've created. You see?
Okay, so thank you very much, Wendy, for this very, very insightful sharing and very clear, in fact. And so this talk has been recorded. And so whoever would like to listen to it again can do so. And so maybe we can just conclude with a moment of quiet and thanking everyone very much for your participation too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So deep. Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Radha. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Same for me.
Thank you, Radha.